start the recording, and I am going to welcome, I see we have some folks here joining us for Family Partners Weekly Lunch and Learn. Today is Thursday, June 25th, 2020, and I'm very happy to have with us Tracy Klingener, who is with Morris and Essex Mental Health Association. I jumbled the words, but we all know who you are, Tracy. So I would just like a few housekeeping items. We are thrilled that you've joined us for what we like to consider our lunch with an expert. And we love to see smiling faces, but we are also A-OK if you want to keep your camera off and nibble on your sandwich while you're gaining some knowledge. So that's okay. But we're glad that you've joined us for today. And I want to remind you that this is your lunch with an expert. So if you have questions that you would like Tracy to address, or if she says something that brings up another question, please feel free to type it in the chat. And I have some team members who will be watching the chat, and they will share the questions with Tracy as we go through the presentation. I also want to remind you that as a participant for the Lunch and Learn, after this event, probably early next week, you will receive Tracy has been kind enough to offer to share her slides with us that she's sharing today. And also, if everything goes well, you will receive a recording of today's presentation. And I think what I'm going to do now is just remind everybody to please mute. I hear some background noise. I think if you're not speaking, please mute. Remember that you are encouraged to sign in on the chat if you have questions. And I'm going to introduce Tracy Klingener. I'm hearing a little background noise. Diane and Sonia, you hearing that?
No.
Yes, I do.
How about you mute, Diane?
Okay, that's me.
Thanks. Perfect. Tracy Klingener is the Director of Suicide Prevention Services for the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris. She is an associate counselor working towards her LPC, her licensed professional counselor. Is that correct, Ms. Tracy?
Yeah.
Fabulous. She has her master's in community counseling, and she is a certified mental health first aid instructor, and she has been working in the mental health field for over 20 years. So we are very grateful to have Tracy with us today to discuss a very important and probably very prevalent topic for us, right, which is mental health and anxiety management in youth. So with no further ado, I am going to turn it over to Tracy. And again, remember, if you have questions throughout, please feel free to utilize the chat function, and we will try to get your questions to Tracy. So Tracy, with no further ado, I'm turning it over to you, and I will start the screen share.
Okay, thanks, Holly. So good afternoon, everyone. So the presentation that we're going to be going through today talks not only about stress and anxiety, but how we could help our youth cope with the anxiety and stress about what's going on in today's world. So first, I'm going to give an overview of what mental illness is, talk about some common mental illnesses when we talk about youth, the difference between stress and anxiety. And like Holly said, if you have any questions, write it in the chat, and one of the lovely ladies at Family Partners will let me know what they are. So Holly, you can move to the next slide. So what a mental illness is, it affects a person's life all around. So it affects their daily living, working, attending school, carrying out activities, and really having satisfying relationships. So when we talk about a mental illness, it's really about the severity and duration. So I'll give you an example. So I had to put my dog to sleep probably around almost 3 years ago, and I don't have kids. So he was my life. I had him for 12 years, and I was extremely sad over losing him. But I wasn't diagnosed with major depressive disorder. When I was in high school, I was actually being bullied, and this was before social media. And I actually was diagnosed with major depressive disorder because I stopped hanging out with the friends that I did have. I wasn't showering. I was crying. I was sleeping all the time. So there's the difference between just being sad and being diagnosed with a mental illness. So some statistics, 1 in 5 youth are diagnosed with a mental illness. Nearly 1 in 3 adolescents meet the criteria for an anxiety disorder by the age of 18. And while there are various types of anxiety disorders, phobias and separation anxieties tend to be the most common. And as peer relationships become more important, social anxieties are more likely to develop. Next slide. So anxiety disorder. And this next slide's coming up. We're really going to talk about the difference between stress and anxiety. So sometimes children may say they're anxious, and I feel like especially nowadays, anxious, anxiety, depressed are kind of thrown around. I was actually giving a presentation and someone was talking to a friend about how they were diagnosed with an anxiety disorder, and the friend was like, oh yeah, me too, I get anxiety too. But that goes back to our definition about the severity and duration and if it affects every area of your life. So if you're so anxious you aren't going out, you aren't hanging out with your friends, that's when you want to be concerned. So signs can include reoccurring fears and worries about routine parts of everyday life, changes in behavior such as irritability, avoiding activities, schools, or social interactions. So there's that social anxiety piece, dropping grades, school avoidance, trouble sleeping or concentrating, substance use, chronic physical complaints. And we see this a lot in the younger kids, having frequent tantrums, are in a constant motion and can't sit quietly. So types of anxiety experienced by youth. So the main ones are separation anxiety, panic disorder, generalized anxiety, and phobias. So separation anxiety, so that excessive anxiety concerning separation from being home or from a parent. The youth may develop excessive worry to the point of being reluctant or refusing to go to school and being alone. They might have nightmares, complaints of physical symptoms may occur. So an example is my best friend. She has one child and she is home with her daughter a lot. And even when her daughter is at a sleepover, she's always calling, finding out where her mom is. Sometimes even when she's home, if she doesn't know where her mom is, she's looking for her. So generalized anxiety. So there's that excessive anxiety and worry about events or activities. So the youth has difficulty controlling that worry. They may become restless, difficulty concentrating. They might become irritable. They might have irritability, sleep difficulties. So I actually suffer from an anxiety disorder. So it's really that excessive worry. So for example, ladies who are on the phone, you might relate to what I'm about to say. So I was getting out of the shower and I had makeup running down my face, mascara. So I go to take my towel and wipe it under my eye, and I actually wiped my eyeball. So if I didn't have anxiety, I would say, oh, that hurt, and move on with my day. But because I was diagnosed with anxiety, I have that, oh my God, I'm gonna go blind, what's happening? And that excessive worry kind of just takes over. And when I talk about someone experiencing restlessness, fatigue, irritability, that irritability, even though I'm really mad at myself for being so stupid, I tend to take it out on other people. So when we talk about panic disorders, this is the presence of reoccurring unexpected panic attacks and persistent worry about having panic attacks. So panic attacks refer to the sudden onset of intense apprehension, fearlessness, terror, often associated with an overwhelming feeling of doom. There may be shortness of breath, chest pain, discomfort. A lot of times people think that they're having a heart attack. I know I've had panic attacks before, and I've felt this overwhelming feeling of deja vu, and I'm trying to remember how the situation is giving me deja vu, which just adds to my anxiety, especially about what's going on. So phobias, that's the fear of spiders, the fear of airplanes. So it's that persistent, irrational fear of a specific object or activity, situation. The intense fear causes the youth to avoid those activities. So especially when we're talking about the older youth, the teens, that's where social anxiety comes in. For instance, my husband is the opposite of me. So I'm Italian, I'm loud, I like to make friends. I'm an only child, so when I was little, I had to be outgoing or I would have no friends. My mom would only play with me for so long. So my husband's the opposite. So he's very quiet. He's had the same friends forever. When he gets into different social situations, he kind of shuts down. So he doesn't like to be in those social situations. Even when we got married, he was so anxious about everyone looking at him when we got married, and that he was going to pass out. He had a few cocktails before the wedding. And even though he says it's because of his social anxiety, I think some of it was the fact that he was getting married. But that's just my personal opinion. So the difference between stress and anxiety, stress is usually the result of something external. So you might have stress over a test, but once that test is over with, usually that stress and anxiety subsides. If you have a plan of tackling that, if you're overwhelmed and you come up with a plan, usually the stress level and anxiety subsides. So the key difference between the two is that sense of helplessness. So by rolling up your sleeves and tackling the stress, you feel less helpless. But when we're talking about anxiety disorder, it's that overwhelming feeling of hopelessness and helplessness. So anxiety keeps hanging on after the problem's resolved. So yes, anxiety can be triggered by stress, but chronic anxiety needs to be treated as its own issue rather than as a product of stress. So you can alleviate an anxiety disorder by going on vacation, getting a massage. That anxiety is going to hang around. With stress, we've all experienced stress in our lives at some point. So when we do something that we enjoy, like walking, like I just said, getting a massage, going on vacation, having a cocktail, that stress level tends to reduce. So anxiety involves needless worry. So a lot of symptoms of stress can mimic anxiety, from trouble sleeping, stomach aches, irritability, the inability to focus. So they could look awfully similar. However, there's one telltale symptom that signals anxiety, and only anxiety, and that's a persistent feeling of apprehension or dread. So panic attacks, the term panic attack gets thrown around just like the word anxiety and depression, to the point where many of us think that a panic attack is simply the state of feeling panicked. However, a panic attack is actually a very specific experience of heightened fear, discomfort. Remember, I said many times people think that they're having a heart attack, especially if they've never experienced a panic attack. So they could have excessive sweating, trembling, the sensation of choking, chills, numbness, and also too, usually people have panic attacks that have some underlying anxiety, and specifically sometimes an anxiety disorder. So we're going to go on and talk about protective factors. So these factors help youth become resilient to the outside stressors in life. So protective factors can include healthy practices, so healthy eating, exercise, high self-esteem, good problem-solving skills, feelings of being in control of their own life, a consistent home, family routine, familial support. So it's really, when we're talking about these protective factors, we're really talking about stability in some way, shape, or form. It's also, monitoring the youth activities, having a good social support system, having good friends. There's economic security with their family, community bonding, and feeling close to at least one trusted adult. So there's that stability again that I've been talking about. Holly, can you go to what is positive mental health? Thank you. So what is positive mental health? So it's that state of well-being that allows us to enjoy our lives and can help children really weather the storm, and has various components. So positive emotions, life satisfaction, a sense of purpose. And remember, just like everything else in life, just like physical illnesses, good mental health is not static. It changes over time depending on what's going on. So for example, a few years ago, I had a seizure for the first time in my life. So my sense of purpose, my life satisfaction, those positive emotions went right down the tube. So I didn't have positive mental health. And because I was having all these health problems, and because I was diagnosed with depression when I was in high school, those feelings started to come back again. And I was experiencing those signs and symptoms of depression. Now that I have some of my health issues under control, I'm back on that track of positive mental health. So why is positive mental health important? So a strong foundation in childhood can lead to a healthy, happy, and productive life. So positive mental health is associated with academic success, positive connections, the ability to adapt, having positive attitudes, not being negative, and really having those healthy lifestyle behaviors. So how, as parents, can we support mental health? So connect, especially now when we're in this pandemic. Connection is so important, and that could come in various ways, through Zoom, through FaceTime. Even my neighbor who has 3 kids, one of them has a girlfriend, they have driveway chats. So be active together, take walks, swim in your swimming pool, get out there, play a sport with your family. So take notice and encourage and praise the positive behaviors of the youth. Keep learning, encourage your child to learn, and especially right now, especially when we're talking about social distancing, you could talk about your child really starting a hobby or spending more time doing the hobbies that they enjoy. I know I was talking to a young lady who was really passionate about drawing, but when she was in school and doing sports, she didn't really have that time to commit to drawing as much as she liked. And that's one way that she's been coping with the pandemic, is spending more time doing the stuff she enjoys. So giving your time as a parent to your child, is so important, and showing love and affection. So when we're talking about what to say and what not to say, you don't want to say to your child, I think you need to try harder. Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Just think positive. Like I said a few minutes ago, I was having a lot of health problems. When I had my seizure, I couldn't drive. I almost lost my bottom teeth. So it was a lot going on. And I remember my mom saying, well, just think positive. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if it was only that easy. And it's so hard, especially when you're in it, to think positive. Another thing not to say to someone is, well, it could always be worse. So my friend actually said to me when I had my seizure, well, it could always be worse. At least you weren't driving. At least your husband was home when you had it. And I remember thinking, absolutely. And there's people that are going through a lot more difficult things than I am. But to me in that moment, it was pretty shitty. And I actually couldn't see a light at the end of the tunnel. Another thing not to say is you always make everything such a big deal. And a lot of times that's why youth don't want to go to their parents, because parents think that their youth is being dramatic. You know, I remember my first breakup and I thought I was never going to find another guy, that this was the love of my life, that I was never going to get married. And as an adult, I could see how that wasn't true. But I think when youth are talking to adults, it's hard for them to just listen non-judgmentally. And I think that's what we all want, not just as a youth, but as an adult, to be listened to and to be heard. So some things we could say, is there anything that I could do to make you feel better? I know you're doing your best. Sometimes life could be really stressful. I'm concerned about you. We're going to get through this together. Would you like to talk more about what you're feeling? If not, I could connect you to talk to someone else if you don't want to talk to me. And at the end of this presentation, there's actually some resources that I give that you could pass on to your youth or even use for yourself. You know, saying something like, we could sit and come up with ways to overcome some of your worries. I'm here for you. You are not alone. I think I'm here for you and you are not alone are two of the most powerful things we could say to someone, especially if that person's struggling and feels like they are alone. So when we talk about helping children cope, I kind of wanted to focus on the pandemic with this, and the following slides after that are really going to talk about specific age ranges and how to help those youth in those age ranges cope with the pandemic. So children and teens react in part on what they see from adults around them. So when parents, caregivers deal with COVID calmly and confidently, they can provide the best support for their child. Parents can be more reassuring to others around them, especially their children. So you want to talk with your child about COVID, answer any questions, share facts in a way that your child may understand. And that's going to be different depending on the age of your child. You want to reassure your child that they are safe. Let them know that it's okay to feel upset. Share with them how you're dealing with your own stress so they can learn from coping. I feel like role modeling is very important, not only with the pandemic, but also in life in general. You know, kids model the behavior of their parents. So if they see them stressed and overwhelmed and how they're dealing with their stress, it's going to be a learned behavior, and that's how they're going to learn how to deal with their stress. So limit your family's exposure to news coverage, events, even social media. Try to keep up with those normal, regular routines. Take breaks. Make sure your child gets lots of sleep. Well, sleep, because not getting enough sleep increases your child's stress level, and it actually decreases their ability to deal with that stress. Also, eating well is very important too. We all enjoy ice cream. Well, at least I enjoy ice cream. And eating those salt, sugary foods, but studies have actually shown that the more you actually ingest that kind of food, the it lowers your ability to cope with and handle stress. Also connect with your family or friends. I graduated college 20 years ago, and I kind of lost touch with my girlfriends, and now we reconnected. We have Zoom conversations. So it's kind of one of the upsides of the pandemic. So spend time with your child in meaningful activities. My neighbor has 3 sons, and they're out there all the time with their dad playing baseball, basketball. So just as there's no way to react to a health risk, there's no one best way to cope with the emotional challenges that may accompany it. So everyone reacts differently to anything in their lives. So people react in a variety of ways, especially, their attitudes, their stress level may increase and decrease even in one day, in the same day. So each person gets through their emotional challenges in their own time and their own terms. I think that's really important to remember. So when we're talking about kids between the ages of 4 to 7, elementary kids are likely to show signs of regression right now. So for example, in a 4-year-old, you might see what you saw in them at 2 years old. You might even see bedwetting. You may not have their full attention. So like I said, of course, kids are all different. And if yours aren't exhibiting these signs, that's great. But if they are, it's important to know that this can be normal, especially for what's going on right now. So the most helpful things parents can do is to stick to that schedule or routine. However, that doesn't necessarily mean sticking strictly to your pre-COVID schedule. In fact, it may be better to establish a new schedule with age-appropriate explanations of why things are going to be different for a while. So kids at this age may not be capable of following the rules. So at the age of 7 to 10, so kids who have graduated beyond that early elementary into later elementary years are more likely to be aware of how unusual our current situation is. They may be fearful not only for their own health, but for the health of their family members. They may be more likely to pick up on their parents' stress and anxiety and have their own worries. So that's why it's so important to role model positive behaviors. So all of this might manifest in these kids and youth expressing concerns even about their grandparents or releasing their anxiety as anger and irritability. So children need age-appropriate information about the coronavirus, how it spreads, and their own safety from getting seriously ill. As far as how parents can help their kids at this age, spend as much time with them as possible. Remain available to answer any questions they might have. Teach them relaxation techniques, mindfulness, so things that could help their ability to cope. And at the end of the presentation, I actually have 2 mindfulness activities. So it's also important for kids to get out and do some physical activities. So whether it be swimming in the backyard, partaking in a social distance bike ride as a family, walking on a trail, just getting out. So children 10 to 13, parents should encourage good sleep hygiene. Validate how hard this must be for your child. So kids in this age group may be a little more reluctant to vocalize their worries and fears. Just because they aren't talking about them doesn't mean that they're not having them. So you can model for them by expressing some of the things you're worried about and how you're handling the worry. You could also suggest doing things together to manage that stress. Like I said, taking a walk in the woods, taking a virtual yoga class together. Now even gyms are having outdoor classes, so that's something that you could participate in. Doing a meditation online on YouTube, downloading an app, just doing things together as a family. So teens are likely to experience some of the biggest losses as a result of COVID. So they're losing proms, graduations. I was actually one of the facilitators. The New Jersey Department of Health actually had a youth town hall a few weeks ago, and we were talking about how your life was affected as youth by COVID. And one of the young ladies said, well, you know, I'm applying for all these colleges and I didn't even get to go visit them. And that's something as an adult I didn't even think of. So they're missing out on all the plays they're supposed to be a part of. Their final performances as choir, sporting events, all these things that they've been looking forward to for their entire school year isn't going to happen. So what I'm hearing from parents is kids are responding with an increase in irritability. They might be sleeping all day, staying up late at night, saying they're in one place only for the parents to find out they're at their friend's house, breaking social distancing rules instead. So teenagers hold friendships in a much higher regard than younger kids, right? So when I was in high school, I didn't want to be seen with my parents. I didn't want to hang out with my parents. I thought they were weird. I thought they were old. I thought they were old-fashioned, that they didn't understand what was going on in my life. So friendships are like family for kids. So their friend groups, like I just said, are a second family that provide not just entertainment and social interaction, but that serious emotional support. So we want to keep in mind, we want to keep an eye on our teens for big changes in behavior, changes that are different. So for example, if, you know, they're having a lot of FaceTime with their friends, or like my neighbor, how him and his girlfriend are having social distancing in their driveway. If all of a sudden they're not doing that, you know, if they're isolating in their bedroom, or they're not eating, or they're eating too much, or they're not sleeping, that's something that we want to talk to our kids about. You know, give specific examples. I always think that's really important. So like I said earlier, I'm very outgoing, I'm chatty. My husband, I think, has become a master of tuning me out because that's how much I talk. But we were in the car the other day and I wasn't being chatty, I wasn't talking, I was kind of just staring out the window. And he said to me, so why are you being weird? And I said to him, I don't know what you mean. Like, what am I doing? And he's like, I don't know, you're just acting weird. So my response as an adult was, okay, whatever. So I think it's important when we approach youth or even adults, we say, hey, I noticed that, you know, you're not coming down for dinner. I noticed that, you know, you're not laughing as much as you normally do, or you're not talking to your friends as much as you usually do. Is something going on? I'm concerned about you. So it's important to give specific examples. One, so the youth, your child, even the adult, knows kind of what you're honing in on. And also, two, it shows that you care enough to even notice that they have this change. So parents can actually
I did talk to my supervisor and
recognize that they still have it, and difficult will not last forever. So we really want to encourage your child to plan a future vacation. Sit down with them, be like, hey, so, you know, let's talk about where you'd like to go on a vacation. If you have a vacation already planned, talk about that. You excited about the vacation we're going to? We're going to the beach in August. We're going to go to Cape Cod. Even though that may be different, you know, let's research some things that we could do together. That kind of stuff. So kind of getting them to think about that there is going to be a future, that things aren't going to last forever like this. So when we talk about college kids, we want to empathize with them. And I think empathy goes a long way, not just for youth, but for people in general. We just want to be heard. And that goes back to that listen non-judgmentally. So whatever feelings of grief and fear are affecting you are also affecting your college student. So put yourself in their shoes. So that's really what empathy is. So they are probably under just as much stress, if not more, as they try to complete their semester, even though it's over, but when they were completing the end of their semester in unexpected ways. Many students may be questioning their decision to go to college in the first place, or what school will be like for them when they return. Can they still choose their roommates? Are they going to have roommates? You know, my neighbor, her son is in college, and he was supposed to be moving in with 5 of his friends. Now that's not going to happen. He already found out that out of his 4 classes, 2 of them are going to be online. So should he commute to college? He's on the baseball team. Is he going to be able to play baseball? Are there going to be games? So these are all anxiety and stress that are going on with college kids. So it's just taking the time and really listening to their concerns. So encourage flexibility. This is a time to talk about the importance of being, flexible and dealing with the unexpected change, because life can be unexpected at times. So research actually has shown and continue to show that making friends is among the top reason for going to and staying in college for young adults. So part of that reason is obvious, right? So kids, youth love to socialize. They love to socialize with friends, except if you're my husband who has social anxiety. Perhaps less obvious is that students need to connect with other students about what they're learning. So when we talk about kids that or youth that have anyone under the age of 20, I call a kid because I'm 41, so I apologize. For all the youth that have graduated, it's going to be difficult for them to find a job. I know I was reading someplace that the hospitality field actually saw a huge job cut in March. So given the abrupt and fundamental shift of COVID, service industry has been affected. Like I said, we really need to manage our expectations about your adult children, about getting a job, as well with regard to what they contribute financially to their household. So don't expect your new college grad to land their dream job soon. I mean, even when I graduated and there was no COVID 20 years ago, they're not going to land their dream job in a COVID society or not. And sometimes that's hard. So parents need to remember that graduating students just had the rug pulled out from underneath them during the last leg of their journey and are likely worried about their next steps. Try not to pressure graduating students to land their ideal job right now. So mindfulness. I touched on this a few slides ago. So mindfulness gives us a glimpse into the moment that really matters. So checking in. How am I doing right now? It's okay to have negative emotions. We want to acknowledge them, help process your emotions without getting carried away by them. So, it's acknowledging in that moment, okay, I'm stressed. What am I stressed out about? Acknowledging it and trying to move past it. So mindfulness can help improve our self-awareness. It's a skill that almost anyone can develop. Mindfulness can create an inner sense of peace and calm, and being mindful helps us reconnect with each other, reconnect with ourselves, and who we might actually take for granted, those people out there. It allows us to connect with our family, with our friends, and do something together. So on the next slide, here's an exercise. It's a 1-minute mindfulness exercise. So find a quiet place to relax, close your eyes, bring your attention to where you feel your breath is at that moment. So it could be in your lungs, it could be in your nose, and just count each breath for just 1 minute. Every time you get to 10 breaths, reset and count from 1 again. When you get distracted, you want to bring your attention back to your breath. And listen, I always have a lot going on up in my head. I'm always thinking about 75 things at once. So don't be hard on yourself if it takes you a while to be in the moment, to be present, to kind of let everything go in your mind and just focus on your breath. You know, I think this is a time where we need to not be hard on ourselves and really be in the moment and be okay with ourselves. So if you start to feel excessive worry, Holly, thank you. So you want to simply focus your intention on the following steps. So I actually used to work at a sexual assault facility, and when people were experiencing symptoms of post-traumatic stress, I would ask them to do some of these 5 steps. So name 5 things that you could see, 4 things that you could feel. You know, I might even say something like, name me 3 things that are blue in this room. So it really brings the person back and focuses their attention. So I will always remember this. I was in college. I actually am a survivor of sexual assault. And I was walking around the square at my college, and all of a sudden I thought I saw the individual who sexually assaulted me, and I couldn't breathe. I started walking backwards, and actually a police officer stopped me because I was actually walking out into the street, and he sat with me and he said, okay, let's take a deep breath. Let's breathe together. And then he started asking me some of these questions. You know, what are 5 things that you could see? 2 things that you could smell right now. So it really brings you back into that moment. So the next slide is some resources. So I don't know if any of you have heard of the Not Okay app. So it's an app that you could download to your phone and put in a few people that you could text if you're not okay. So if you're not feeling great, you just say, I'm not okay. And these individuals that you have will get that message. You Matter, which is through the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. It talks about different mental illnesses, so you could read more information about them. Active Minds, the Trevor Project, which is focused on the LGBTQ community. They actually have a line that you could call if you're a part of the community and talk to someone that might have experienced something that you're going through. Love is Respect. So there's bullying resources on there, domestic violence resources on there. So there are just a few links that you could provide to your child, to one of your students. So they're great resources to have. Other resources are the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, Second Floor, which is a crisis line for youth up until the age of 24 years of age. So even though that's a phone number, they could call or text that number. The New Jersey Suicide Prevention Hope Line, the Trevor Lifeline, which I spoke about a minute ago, the Crisis Text Line. And now that individual doesn't have to be suicidal. That crisis can be whatever that person's experiencing in that moment. So maybe the loss of a job, financial issues, breakup. So the individual doesn't have to be suicidal. And so this is a resource for youth or adults. And then there's the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. They have a lot of great resources on their website as well. And I just wanted to end with my phone number and extension, and also to the link that's below, Stop Teen Suicide, is something that we just launched at the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris, because youth suicide is the second leading cause among youth. We really wanted to create this website not only for youth, but for trusted adults, for parents, so they could go on there and look at the warning signs and risk factors for suicide. And also how to start a conversation, what to say, what questions to ask. Also on there is people's testimonials. We have a young man on there who talks about his attempt with suicide. We have 2 other individuals that lost a friend, a family member by suicide. So if you have an opportunity, go on there, check it out. I may be biased, but I think it's a wonderful website. So that's also another resource for you. I'm also a resource for you. So if you have any questions after this, if you don't feel comfortable putting it in the chat, you could call me. Or even if it's 2 days from now and you're like, oh, I have this question, please call me. We do information or referral at our agency. So if you're looking for counseling services, if you have questions about services in your community, please call me. So I'm another tool for your toolbox. So that is the end of my presentation. I want to thank you all for taking your lunchtime, for being here, being present, wanting to learn information. So I just want to thank you all for participating. I want to thank Family Partners for asking me to do this. And are there any questions?
Tracy, if I can thank you so very much. An excellent, excellent presentation with a lot of good information. And I want to remind all of our lunch company today that we will be sending out the slides that Tracy shared with us, as well as a video recording of her presentation. I like that you really cover a lot of things that are not on your slides, Tracy. You do a really great job of embellishing and giving us details, which are very helpful. But two things actually I wanted to comment on is you mentioned empathy, and I don't know if anybody has never seen the Brene Brown video on empathy. I'm going to include that in the cover letter, the link to that, because it's a really cool, very short. Do you know what I'm talking about, Tracy? Have you seen it? It's a little cartoon that describes the difference between being sympathetic towards being empathetic, and I think that's really something that we probably all need to work on, right? Is understanding how to be empathetic and also how to listen.
Yes.
I think, yeah, God gave us 2 eyes and 1 mouth, right? We're supposed to do 2 eyes, 2 ears, listen and see more than talk.
Still for me, Holly.
Is that your line?
Well, I always say that we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth because listening is twice as hard as talking.
That's funny. But the other thing I wanted to highlight, or I would like your reaction to, is many times, Tracy, throughout your presentation, you talked about the importance of parents and caregivers modeling behavior. And it just really brought to mind, we had a presenter last week, Laura Mickley from Northwest Cap was our presenter. And one of the quotes that she shared, which I pulled up, I wanted to share with our lunch companions today, was she said, a child's ability to transform is directly dependent on the adult's ability to stay calm in crisis.
Yes, absolutely.
And what I find interesting is it's very important, of course, to look at how we can support our youth, but the issue of self-care comes to mind because, we need to also be on our feet to be able to model appropriate behavior and also to help them effectively. So what thoughts do you have on self-care for the caregiver as far as our importance of, being healthy ourselves?
So I think it's important that caregivers, parents take the time and do something that they enjoy, even if it's reading a book. I started watching some new show on Bravo, million dollar listings. So it's doing something you enjoy, whatever that may be, and just taking time to decompress yourself. You know, a lot of people are coming back to work here at our agency, and I can't even imagine what it's like to be a parent and wondering how you're going to come to work and what's going to happen to your kids, who's going to watch your kids. You know, it's, you know, maybe, you know, one parent staying at home, but then what happens? They might be falling behind at work. So it's really important, I think, for everyone to take time for themselves, whatever that may look like for you, to decompress, whatever is stress relieving for you, is to really take the time to do that. And I think sometimes we forget to do that as caregivers, as parents. You know, I work in the mental health field, and we're always worried about taking care of the other person. Sometimes we really need to take that step back and do what we love to do for ourselves. And a lot of times we, especially caregivers, we think that's selfish. But if we don't take care of ourselves, we're not going to be able to provide that support to others.
Mm-hmm. And many of the resources that you listed are also good resources for the caregiver, correct? As far as, I mean, I think a lot of times too, I know at Family Partners, for those of you who don't know, Family Partners is a big part of what we do is we go into the home and provide support to parents who often, when they have a youth with a challenge, they're overwhelmed and they may not even know where to look for help. Quite frankly, they might be frazzled and exhausted, frustrated, angry. You know, it really goes any emotion that you can imagine. But I think we need to remember that a lot of the resources that Tracy provided, Family Partners is one of them, is that if you are a caregiver, educator, counselor, however it might be, and you're not sure of what to do, the important thing I think is to ask, right? Is to ask questions, is to seek help. And no shame, right? No shame, Tracy, right? No shame zone.
Nope. Just like you would seek help if you had a physical illness. You know, in our society, we treat mental illness and physical illness very differently. And we have to realize that having a mental illness is a brain disease, just like any other disease. So we need to remind ourselves to take care of our own mental health and really promote positive mental health, and talk to someone. If it's not one of those resources I provided, if it's not your organization, it's, you know, going to therapy if you can, really just talking to someone to relieve that stress too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I have an interesting comment in the chat, Tracy. I have someone asking if there are resources available for the UK, which I think this is an interesting thing that we're seeing. Tracy and I had some exciting moments this morning in that she was having some technology challenges. So that is a negative of COVID, and that the technology can be challenging. But I think we must have a friend with us for lunch from the UK. Pippa, yeah. I'm going to guess that's why you're asking the question, but it's interesting in that I know for us, and Tracy, I'd like you to also say what experience you're finding, but for Family Partners, you know, we feel like we're in the business of sharing resources, and because technology is such a big thing, I think the lines are blurring as far as states and continents on how we can share information. I think, you know, what works here may work somewhere else. So I would say, yes, Pippa, some of these resources I think would be absolutely helpful to you, but I would encourage you to contact Family Partners directly if there's something that you're needing that you're not finding. Did you want to add to that, Tracy?
So actually the crisis text line has a phone number for people in the UK. So if you just go on the crisis text line, they actually have a phone number that you could utilize if you're in the UK.
That's fabulous. I know we have been fortunate enough we've had a youth from Sierra Leone join our youth group last week. We have a gentleman who's participating in our Hero Huddle for Fathers from Canada. So it's interesting how the COVID is a negative, but it's a positive. And I think most importantly, we're in the business of keeping these conversations going because there is help. There are resources. I loved you're not alone. I'm here for you. I mean, I think that's important for folks that are struggling, but I also think it's an important answer for caregivers that they're not alone, right? I mean, it's really, it's a hard topic to bring up. You know, it's not something, the first thing you're going to mention at the bus stop or the water cooler, but I think more people are challenged than first meets the eye on social media. Am I right?
Yeah.
And, you know, I would really encourage you to remember that when you're speaking with family and friends, and to remain open and non-judgmental, even with it's simple, but it's not simple. We've had a lot of conversation around who's comfortable going to a restaurant once it opens. There are people who are very uncomfortable, and there are people who can't wait to get there.
Yep.
And both are right? I mean, we can't judge. So Pippa was happy with that answer, but Pippa, I'm going to tell you, please contact us if you would like more information or resources. We are happy to connect with you. Tracy, what's the one thing, if they probably can't pick one thing, but what's one thing you wish people knew that they may not know about either the Mental Health Association or supporting youth, or just, you know, the field in general? Is there something that you really think is like a little known fact that you'd like to share with us? I'm picking your brain. This is our lunch coming to a close. Well, I think sometimes people, you know, misunderstand. You know, I joke with family partners, you know, we're kind of in the business of starting awkward conversations. You know, the minute I go to, for instance, a business connection event and I say what I do, almost always someone will turn to me and say, I'm so worried about my nephew, or, you know, a terrible thing is happening with my daughter right now. And I think it's interesting in that I think we just all need to share, because in our experience, and you probably see the same thing, isolation is one of the biggest challenges for any struggle, and COVID is only magnifying that. Am I right?
Yep. And it's one of the risk factors for suicide. So I think it's so important to stay connected, to reach out for help if you're feeling sad, if you're feeling suicidal. You kind of touched on what I was going to say, Holly, is that I think it's really important for people to share their story, because the more we talk about it and the more we normalize it, the more we reduce that stigma associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I think that's probably a very, very good point, and that the sharing of the stories just makes others, you never know when you're sharing your story that someone else might be brave to come forward and sharing their story. And there's a lot going on in our world right now, and not much of it is has a calming effect. So I think there's a lot of division in our world politically, and a lot of different diverse things going on. But I think what we're hearing today, maybe this is like a good way to wrap things up, but I think, you know, we're really all in this together, in that bottom line, we want to be the best individuals that we can be, and we want to be available to those who we love and that we care for. But we have to remember caring for ourselves as part of that equation, because there's a lot of stressors on all of us: parents, caregivers, providers, educators, essential workers, non-essential workers. I mean, it really is. I think I choose to, what is the Mr. Rogers quote where he says his mother says, always look for the helpers, right? In a situation like that. And I think as stressful as the news can be, I always look for those stories, right? Because people are doing amazing things, coming forward to help other people.
Absolutely.
That's terrific. Tracy, I'm going to end with, tell me one more time the website, your new website, because I think that's a tremendous resource. What is is it stopteensuicide.org?
No, it's actually stopteensuicide.mhaessexmorris.org.
Okay. Stop. Go ahead. Okay.
Yeah. So people can get from there.
So if there are no further questions, folks, I'm just going to thank you for spending your time with us. And Tracy, thank you so much for, there's so much information, but it is also empowering, because there is so much that we can do and so much that we should do to support the mental health of our youth and ourselves. So I will remind our viewers that Family Partners, we offer 6 online support groups every week. 4 for adults, 2 for youth. We have Positive Parenting in English Monday nights, Positive Parenting in Spanish Tuesday nights. Wednesday night we have Hero Huddle, which is a support group for dads. Thursday we have Parent Support Network, which is another opportunity for parents to share resources and stories and find strength in one another. And then Tuesday mornings and Friday evenings, we have a youth partnership program that is a very fun and safe space for youth between the ages of 13 and 21 to gather and feel positivity and acceptance and growth. So we hope to see you next week. We're back. Believe it or not, exciting. Let's see who we have next week. I have to consult my notes. We have the folks from Hope One in Morris County. They offer fantastic services, mobile services. So they're going to be with us next Thursday to talk about what they have going and how they're supporting us in COVID and otherwise. So big thank you to Tracy from the Director of Suicide Prevention Services for the Mental Health Association of Essex and Morris. Tracy, thank you so much for making it happen today. We really enjoyed it and appreciate your help.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, everyone stay safe. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.